We are looking at what it means to be salt and light. Now, I've preached this text many times. I've preached it, probably one of my favorite sermons ever did this text about it's been about 5 years ago. And I did this, and I just remember coming in. I was not there, I wasn't playing that day, and I was coming in, and I was singing the song, This Old Life of Mine. Not like we just sang. But I remember singing that song and having no voice. I remember having an episode of not having a cold, it's kind of like the cold going around. And I had absolutely no power in my voice. It was just kind of this scraggly, horrific version of that song. But it spoke to me because during that message, I think God really showed His power in the midst of that, because I was feeling terrible. And I've had times where I have felt bad and preached. There are times I wish I was dead instead of being up here. Just felt that sick. And yet God showed that I had called you to be a light. I remember preaching this passage, and it was just one of those memorable sermons. I don't remember much. I don't even remember what I preached last week. I have short-term memory when it comes to things that I have preached on. But because without any notes, you don't really look back and stuff. So today I'm talking about salt and light. What does that mean? So we've all heard, probably heard this text. I mean, not maybe everybody, but most of you in here heard this text. And so if you got a Bible, open up to Matthew 5. Matthew 5 in the Sermon on the Mount. And in this idea is this notion. In this series, we're talking about a revolution from normal. We talked about the Beatitudes last week. Who are those that are blessed? But this week is kind of the brunt of the Sermon on the Mount, meaning, who is he talking to, and what is it that I'm supposed to do? You see, remember, Jesus is in a culture at that time when He came, which was a very religious culture, and they had a very strict and legalistic way of living. You did things a certain way, and Jesus takes that and He kind of turns it upside down. Now it's funny because we live in a culture now that is not very religious. And so if you choose to live out your faith, you look like you're sticking out. And so that exactly, though, is what Jesus is doing. He's taking a revolution from this outward, you do everything right on the outside. It doesn't matter what your inside looks like. And He takes it and He says, no, we're going to start on the inside. And everything that He says in the Sermon on the Mount flies in the face of what is going on during the day of which He was coming. And it does the same today. The Sermon on the Mount is about doing something. There has to be change. There has to be transformation. That is His message. And so that's the heart of it. You're going to get 3 questions today that I'm going to ask you later. So Steve, don't try to put them up a little too early, because I'm going to walk through the text first and we'll ask these 3 questions after that. So let's open up to Matthew chapter 5 and just kind of plug into what Jesus is saying. It says in verse 13, this is where we're starting. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It is no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled on by men. You are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. And so you have this, we're salt and light. Well, what does that mean to be salt and light? What does that look like? Well, salt and light were 2 very common things in that day. We don't give it a second thought, maybe unless you're a saltaholic, like my wife. She loves salt. I would say that you're not as bad as your father, but you need salt, right? And so my wife continually reminds me that I am supposed to like salt because that's what I'm supposed to be. I don't put salt on anything, and I just don't. And that still doesn't help my high blood pressure, not putting salt on things. And yet she puts it on everything. Okay, she uses no salt, pretty much, so it's fake salt. But in that day, you would use salt for certain reasons. Everybody had salt. You had to have it because we didn't have fridges. So in order to cure the meats, they used salt. That's what they would do. They would cure the meat. So how many of you have had Southern ham? Anybody here have Southern ham? I hate it. because it sounds like it just tastes like it took a salt bath. And I'm not a big fan. I'm always like, too much salt, because then it's like, then your lips pucker and you just, you must like that, because I hate it. Yeah, it's just gross. But that southern ham is super salty. And in those days, of course, they didn't eat ham, so, duh. But in those days, they used salt to cure things and to be able to preserve it. So that's what they would do. They would use salt, and they would soak things in salt water, they would kind of preserve it so it wouldn't rot. And so salt was necessary. And it was sea salt, or salt from the earth. It was something that they would all use. It wasn't manufactured somewhere. And so people always had salt on hand because you needed it. Because not only was it used to preserve things, but it was meant to give flavor, right? And that's what salt does. And Jesus talks about, he says, if salt, look at what he says in this verse 13. He says, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? See, you can't take salt that, in those days, if it loses its taste, you can't make it extra salty again. There's no way of taking salt and saying, I'm going to make it extra salty. You can't do that. And so he's saying, essentially what they did in those days was, if the salt was no good, if it served its purpose, they just threw it out. They would throw it out, throw it on the ground, and people would walk all over, and that's just what you did. That's how you did it. You just got it, you threw it out there, or they threw it in the fire. Throw it, like a manure heap, and that's what they do. They just pitch it. There's no reason. So that's the picture that he's giving. If it should lose its saltiness, in other words, if it's not doing what it was created to do, it's of no use. There's no purpose for it. Now, some of you in this room would say, I don't like that fake salt, no salt. We use it in our house because apparently we want to be, and we want to, for what it's worth. And Stephanie last night, in fact, we had dinner last night, and she says to Maya, boy, this salt tastes different, doesn't it? Because they were using sea salt on something. And, well, of course it tastes different. It's not fake, it's real. And yet I look at salt and I look at Christians, and I would say to you, what good are you if you're not doing the purpose that God has given to you? And that is to magnify and lift Him up. If you aren't doing that, you are of no use. You're of no use to God, you're of no use to anybody. You should be just thrown on a pile and stepped on. Now, I'm not saying literally, let's take you and throw you out there or throw you on a fire. That's not the point. But the point is, you're being of no use. You're of no value. You're of no value to the kingdom. Now, we can say, God says, well, everyone values, but if you're not doing what God asked you to do, which is to be the light and salt of the earth, you're not doing what He created you to do. Frequently, Jesus had discussions with people that would say something about worship. Hey, you worship this way. And He says, what? Even the rocks cry out. Now, I look at a rock, and I think rock doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything. It's just a rock. But they are created to magnify Christ, because that's what they do. They do exactly what they were intended to do. And they bring glory to Him. His creation was created in whose image? His image. We are to magnify our Creator. And when we aren't doing what we're supposed to be doing, then we aren't living the way we're supposed to be living. Then we aren't filling the purpose that He created us to do. And He tells us that you are no good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled on by men. Thrown out the window. Because they didn't have like trash cans in those days. Just throw the old salt, nasty gross stuff. Just throw it in the street because people will walk on it. Now, it's funny that he says throw it out there and trampled on by men, because that was kind of a derogatory statement. And this isn't just casually toss it out. The word that he used is the word called balo. It's in the Greek, and it's to cast out. This isn't like, throw a little salt over your shoulder. That's not that thing. This is, and I have seen some of you and eaten with some of you people that knock over the salt shaker and literally put it on your hand, throw it over your shoulder. I'm like, what is that all about? I know it's superstition. Stop it! Knock a salt shaker over is not bad luck. Betting that the Packers last night were no. All right. Look, it's of no use. They just cast it out. Just get rid of it. It's of no use. That's what it is. It's this very violent looking thing. And so he's trying to tell them that if you aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're of no use. And it flies in the face of all of the religious types of the day. He's saying they've lost their saltiness. He's essentially saying they're of no use. They do all the outward stuff and it doesn't matter. It says salt, but it's just a box of nothing. It's just a canister of nothing, and it's of no use. And so you have to see him telling them this. So then he starts with the light. Now, every house would have some salt, and every house had a light. You didn't walk into a house in the first century and turn on the light switch. We completely don't get this passage sometimes, because we think, oh yeah, light, you turn it on, you turn it off. Look, light was important, because when it was dark, it was dark. It was like extra dark, right? There were no street lights. There were no extra lights laying around, you know. Oh, where's my flashlight? There were no flashlights. I mean, to have light in your house was preparation. Like, where did I put, I don't even know what they started the dumb things with, the candles and lights and oils. Usually it was oil. Oh, did they have a matchbox? Well, probably not, but they had something that they could light their one source of light in the house, and they would put it on a stand. And they would set it on a stand. Why? Because they had to put it somewhere where it would cast the light through the whole room. Perhaps it was a little oil thing and it had a little wick in it and it would throw some light in the room. Because you're thinking, you know, in the wintertime it's probably dark at 6 or 5. Or if you're around here, 4. Wait, not in daylight savings. So, you know, it was dark late and it was dark early in the morning. And so it was work to turn on a light. You had to prepare. You had to know where you left the stand. Now, I'm sure, you know, it's in the middle of the room. They didn't have 47 rooms in their house. So they knew exactly where they would keep their light. So every house had a place that their light stand would sit. And he tells them the following. You are the light of the world. And he uses an illustration. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. Any city in those days would be on top of a hill and have walls and everybody would see it. Now, I've used this illustration 100 times, so you're going to hear it 101 more. And that is, the most impressive thing that I remember seeing of a city is driving into Denver, Colorado. And I know I got some of you folks from Nebraska and lived out in the west side, but if you've ever driven there, that god-awful trip through Kansas, and then you get into eastern Colorado, and it's just as flat. But in the distance, you see Denver, because it's a mile-high city, you know, so it's up there. And you see it in the distance, and it takes a while to get to it, but you can't hide it. There's no hiding the city. You can't just say, hey, let's put the cloak of invisibility up, now nobody can see us. A city on a hill does what it's supposed to do. You can't hide it. It's there. Everybody would see it. And in that day, they get it. Yeah, you got that little city over there, Horeb, you know, and they got their little town. It's up on the mountain, and everybody will see it. Or whatever other city in the world. They get it. You can't hide it. There's no hiding a city. So he's saying there's no hiding a light. He's being, you know, for them to make the connection. Click. Oh, he's talking about we're the light. We can't hide the light. Keep going. No one puts a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand. It gives light for all who are in the house. Just like I said, they put it on a little stand. So I want you just for a minute to understand something. We got to kind of make it real for us. Salt and light. So if I'm light, if I'm the light to the world, do you remember flashlights? Do you remember those? See, I don't use a flashlight anymore, do I? Why? Because I got a phone. And there's an app for that. Where's my flashlight? Did I hide it? Boy, I should have prepared to make sure you had it on your, it would be under F, flashlight. You use your phone. So do me a favor for just a second. Guys that are running lights, kill all the lights in the room. We're going to do a little experiment. And don't go, ooh, like you were in grade school and they turn, those two probably should be turned off too. Amanda, do something. There we go. Okay. Yeah, whatever, all right, so you get it, okay? That's as dark as it's gonna get. But one little light, if I have this little light, and this isn't very impressive, but it's the light on a phone. And I can use it, we use our phones all the time, crawl underneath, looking for cables. But in the dark, a light does exactly what it's supposed to do. It shines. It does exactly, now you can turn the lights on. So you can see the fact that there are lights. Light does what? What does light do? What does it expose? Turn off the light. It exposes the darkness. What is darkness? Darkness is, well, it's the absence of light. It is where we live. We live in a dark and dying world. And we are to be the lights of the world. So hold your finger in Matthew 5 for a second. Let's turn over to John chapter 3. John chapter 3. Jesus understood this metaphor. Probably because he said it. But he understood it in John 3. And we all love John 3:16. So look at John 3:16. But we're not going to stop there. For God loved the world, this is my translation which I love, it says, For God loved the world in this way. He gave His one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in Him will not perish but have eternal life. And we just stopped there, but it doesn't stop there. You know, that's not the only verse in the Bible, so let's keep going. For God did not send His Son into the world that He might condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through Him. Anyone who believes in Him is not condemned, but anyone who does not believe is already condemned, because he has not believed in the name of the one and only Son of God. So we should talk 3:16, 17, and 18, because that would be helpful for people to understand that you are condemned already unless you trust in the name of the one. The one meaning Jesus. Then he says, verse 19, which is very interesting. He said, This then is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people love darkness rather than the light because their deeds were evil. For everyone who practices wicked things hates the light and avoids it, so that his deeds may not be exposed. But anyone who lives by the truth comes to the light, so that his works may be shown to be accomplished by God. Look, Jesus himself is saying that the light is important, but the world won't embrace the light. It just won't, because it exposes their evil deeds. That's what light does. It exposes darkness. You know, that moment when you're wondering, what in the world are my kids doing downstairs and why are the lights off? And so you sneak downstairs and you sneak up to the door and you reach your hand and turn like, what are you doing? That's what the light does. What are you doing? Unfortunately, we have this blind ear to God. I'm not listening, not listening, because we're busy doing something that the light says, don't do. I want you to hear the voice of God when you're caught in the middle of a sin that you know you shouldn't be doing, and I just want you to hear, what are you doing? Because immediately when I do that with my children, my kids are great. But when they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, you know, and I turn on the light, and I say, what are you doing? What do? They stop doing it. Nothing. But they stop doing it. Hear the voice of God. What are you doing? Stop doing it. That's God saying, stop it. Quit it. And that's God being nice. Because sometimes He has to punish our sin. But we don't like those verses, so we leave those out. John 5. We're back. I'm the light to the world. I'm to be a light. And light, Jesus being the light. He is called the light. And the light of the world lives in me. This is why He calls us the light. Because Jesus Himself is the light. And now is He saying, well, Jesus is the light and you're the light. I want you to understand something. When He says you're the light, it's because Christ lives where? In me. He lives inside of me. And the light shines from my inside. And so when Jesus says you are the light, understand that the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all the religious people, they all had the outside going, but the inside was dark because there was no light inside. There was no light inside of them because obviously Christ is not inside of them. And we know through Paul's writings that it's no longer I that live, but Christ in me. And so the light needs to be shining in me. And yet people take and they hide the light. So this is how it works. We'll use the flashlight as our example. It's Sunday. You know what Sunday is? Shine Your Light Day. So we all come to church. Yay, Jesus! Yay! Look at me, I'm a light. Church is over. Yay, I'm a light. We walk outside. We walk out the door. We get in the car. Where's that dumb? I have to turn my light off. Because it's the rest of the week. We turn the light off. But if I look at this, He doesn't tell you get to do that. There's no app for that. Turn the light off. A light is not to be hidden. No putting a basket over it. Hide it under a bushel. No. We won't even get into the theological implications of Satan blowing it up, okay? Won't let Satan blow it up. More like, I probably will blow it up, not Satan. That would be me, because I would turn it off. Satan's not going to blow out your light. You will. You're the one to do that. You're the one that wants to turn it off. You're the one that wants to put the bushel over it. Anyway, we'll get away from that. But here's the deal. We look at this text, and I keep thinking this, and I keep going, well, what does this mean? What does this mean for me? So I got 3 questions for you. The first one is this. Looking at the salt. Am I preserving? Am I seasoning? And am I making others thirsty? If I'm the salt of the earth, if Jesus tells me I'm the salt, then that means that I have to be different. I have to be one that preserves. Preserves what? Well, in those days, we've already talked about it, preserving the meat. There is a preservation of the gospel. There is a sense that we hold it for every day. That there is a preserving aspect, that we not only live out the truths of God on Sunday, but because we're the salt of the earth, that it goes every day. We are forever preserving ourselves under the arm of the gospel. That Jesus Christ changed me. And it's like that every day, not just Sunday. It's a preserving idea. The next one is seasoning. Do I taste different? Now that doesn't mean, I'm going to go up to Joe here and lick his arm and go, yep, he tastes different. We'll just file that under creepy, so let's just put that out. But rather, are we different? Do we taste different? This world is so steeped in sin that quite honestly it's blood tasting, and it needs a little seasoning from Jesus, meaning a transformation of taste. It tastes completely different. One of the secrets that we learned with salt, and like I said, I don't like to cook with a lot of it, but was when I made pasta, as you get older, your mom didn't teach you everything about cooking, and I can't cook, by the way, right? I can't cook, and when I cook dinner and I cook pasta, it's a little bit of olive oil, why? So it doesn't stick together, but I also learned to throw a lot of salt in your water, because it actually cooks it in. Cooks in the saltiness, and that made a big difference. Wow, this spaghetti tastes better. Why? Because it's got salt. It's a little bit more salty inside of it, and so and it wasn't like throw a teaspoon. I mean, it was like lots of salt, and it tastes different. We need to have that in our culture. That there's so much salt out of us that we begin to look different, taste different. It just seeps into everything, and you know what I mean when I say taste. So we are just different. We smell different, meaning that everything about our lives is different. We are transformed by the salt of the one who came and gave himself for us. And the last thing is salty things, of course, make me thirsty. That's what salt does. These pretzels are making me thirsty. Some of you are sitting there, what? That's what salty things do. It makes you thirsty. Who's the one that quenches the thirst? Jesus, right? Because he says he's the living water, right? And so I'm thinking, if I am the salt of the earth, am I making other people thirsty? You should leave here today and say, Ken's preaching is making me thirsty. I need to dig into the Word. I need to dig in and learn and begin to immerse myself more. And it has nothing to do with me, but I'm just using that analogy. Are we making other people thirsty because they get a sense of who we are and say, wow, I need me some of that. I need to start digging into that. That's the salt. It just permeates everything, and it's like, that movie theater popcorn. You go and especially if you go to like Eastgate, whatever, and you dump their salt all over it. I can't eat popcorn, hallelujah, anymore. So, because it's always too salty for me. That's why I have to have the giant drink so I can go to the bathroom 3 times during the movie. Because it makes you so thirsty. But it's not soda salt, it's only water. Diet, go diet. All right, but the idea is that just all that salt makes you thirsty, and I need to be so salty that other people want some water, the living water, the one who will quench their eternal thirst. The next one is this: when we go to the light. The question for you today is, am I hiding the light? Am I hiding it? Is it hiding under a bushel? Am I hiding it? Have I taken the light and said, yay, Jesus on Sunday, right? We've already done this, but let's illustrate it this way. I won't turn the light off. Instead, what I'll do is I'll put it in my pocket. And faintly, there's a little dot of light. That's not what we're supposed to be. It's supposed to be, immersed in, swallow the light. Let it shine through. The light of Christ begins to shine through. Am I doing that, or am I making a habit of hiding it? And I say this to you, the words of Jesus. If anyone is ashamed of being in my kingdom, the Heavenly Father will be what? Ashamed of them. That's not a place I want to live. I don't want to be there. So it's time for me to be the light and act like the light. Live it out. Something radically different. I don't want to hide it anymore. Perhaps you heard today or this week on the news. Well, it wouldn't have been on the news. It would have been on the internet. Because it's all true there. So, on the internet, you maybe heard the story about Louis Giglio, who's behind the Passion Movement, who's about seeing people caught in human slavery and human trafficking, 20-some million people caught in that, and wanting to see these people set free. And the president took a liking to this notion that he wanted to do this. And so he asked him to pray at his inauguration. Now, I think the whole thing's a shame, and I think the whole thing's a witch hunt, because what happened is some people dug up and said, well, he preaches a sermon on the sin of homosexuality. You mean he was preaching the Bible? And they got all bent about that, so Louis just stepped aside and said, you know what, I'm not about that, that's not what I'm going to do, I'm going to step aside. And so what I began to see was not only the liberal left wanting to crucify him because he would, heaven forbid, have a viewpoint that taught the Bible, and he's not allowed to say that. And then you got people on the far, far, far right that want to crucify him because he didn't say the right things, he didn't do the right things, and then they accuse him of all kinds of other things, and I'm like, oh, there we go. You know you've arrived, and both wings are trying to kill you. And here was the thing that I came away with. I know there are people saying, why in the world would he say we do? You know what? I'm just going to tell you straight up. If the president called my house, or his team called my house, and said, would you pray during the inauguration? You know what I'm going to say? Yes, until they vetted me, and then they went, no, don't do it, because we know how you feel about things. But if they asked me, I would think it was an honor, because guess what? I don't write my prayers. And I'm going to say what the Lord lays on my heart. And you might turn my mic off, but I will not back down. And Louis would not have backed down. That was a chance to be the light. But people are trying to quench the light. We want to put the light out. There are those that call themselves the Christian whatever that want to be the police of everything Christian, or whether or not they want to kick his lampstand over because we don't need that. Or they want to say, he's not the light, he's actually a false light. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, stop it. I was not in a good mood Friday. I might have punched somebody in the nose because I saw some of the things that were being said about a man trying to be a light. And I looked at myself and I said, am I hiding the light? I cannot hide the light. It has to shine through me. The last one is this, and this I think is one of the most important things. Look what Jesus tells them. I'm going to run my battery out. Guess what though? Your battery never goes dead when you plug into God. Ever. It's only when you unplug that your battery goes dead. You're of no use. Alright. Listen what he says. Verse 16. In the same way, let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. You have to let your light shine before men. So that what? Listen to what he says. Listen to what he says. Let your light shine before men so that they may see your what? Good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Notice what it does not see. So they may see your light shine and worship you and say great things about the things that you're doing. It's about seeing the things that God has laid on your heart, seeing how he has transformed you, and they may see that and give glory to your Father in heaven. The one whom they don't even know points them to the Father, that they may worship him. Giving glory to is to worship your Father in heaven. So I ask you this, am I causing others to worship God? Do the stuff that I do make them go, wow, I want to worship God? Now I could tell, and I could preach to you and say, look guys, this is what this means. That means you need to be bringing people to church every Sunday if you can, because you need to hear the good news. And you know what? I can tell you that. But here's a better way. You live the light of Christ in such a way that they say, hey, where do you worship? Who is that? I want to come with you because I see your light shining. And I could set the bar really low and say, we don't want to offend people, so you just come up here, and we want to set it so low that it doesn't matter. And your lives are really transformed. And you can, guess what? That's not having, what does that say? Revolution from normal? That's just being normal. But we want to set that light so high that they say, wow, look at your life. It's radically different. And that is what I've been looking for. That is the God that I want to serve because that's real, not fake. And this little light of mine, I want it to shine. I want to see it shine. Something different. So that there's a take on it. I can ask you to invite people to church tonight. Please do. We want you to do that. But I want them to see your life so radically different that they say, hey, where do you go to church? Not you trying to beat them over the head, trying to get them to come, but rather they want to come with you because they see your life. Or do they see your life and they look at you and they say, wow, he says he's a Christian. I don't want to go to that church. Because we've been down that road before. We've had people here that raced a car with the name of the church on there, and they were a hothead. And they were terrible on the track. We don't want that. That says, come to my church. We don't care if you act like an idiot all the time. We want, and I need to be radically different, that people see that and say, wow, that's what I've been looking for this whole time. Who is this God that has set you free? Who is this God that just makes you so excitable? Who is this God that is so amazing, that has made your life different? Why is your marriage so different? Why are your kids so different? Why is everything in your life different? Is it because you make more money? No, it's because of my God. Is it because you're just a harder worker? No, it's because of my God. Is it because I'm on my knees before Him, asking Him to transform every area of my life because I want the light of Christ to shine through me? And when people see the light of Christ, some are going to hate that. Expose the darkness, they're not going to like you. But when you shine, here's what they'll never say. I see the light of Christ in that person and he's a jerk, said by no one. If they see you, I see Ken, and I see a jerk, that's a me problem. But if they see Christ in me, they should say, wow, wow. What is that all about? And that's what this world needs. They need a wow. They need something that goes, that's somebody that lives out what they believe. And I need that because it's transformed every area of their life. The things that they do, the things that they say, how they live. They are consistent. They don't have a light on Sunday only. They have a light everywhere. They don't tell me to come visit my church and I see them cursing and I see them acting like everybody else, backbiting, gossiping, blah, 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 blah. I see people that are different, that love me. Look at the logo. What does it say in Revolution? Well, what does it say in the middle? It's a love revolution. Being the light of the world means that we learn how to love and how to act. This is where it really starts, folks, is that when we suddenly let the inside flow through, it's not about doing everything right and looking right to everybody else, but allowing the light of the world to live in us and shine through us so that all may see who we really are. People who love Jesus, who, yes, have mistakes, but are willing to admit them. Letting Him shine through. We're going to close the service in kind of a different way. Our worship team, they're going to come up and we're going to do the song that we did earlier in the service, this little light of mine again. We're going to remind ourselves of something. This is my declaration. It is time for me to be the light. I don't want to turn it off when I step out the door. I don't want to turn it off when I get in my car. I don't want to turn it off on Monday morning because I got to go to work. But I'm going to spend time in God's Word. I'm going to keep asking myself, are others seeing the light of Christ? Are they glorifying? Are they worshiping God because they see me? Are they? And to be serious about our walk with God. And say, you know what, I want to be radically different for His name's sake, so that He might be honored and He might be glorified. Let's pray. God, thank you for this time that we can be in your house.